The following teaching is possible thanks to the friends and partners of Spirit and Truth Fellowship International.
Well, God bless you and welcome to this session. And in this session on the topic of prophetic foreshadowing, I want to look specifically at the idea of things. God uses things and describes things and uses them, records of them in His Word to also point to future events, specifically things that are concerning Jesus Christ. And when we understand those things, it helps give us a lot more clarity about what God is doing and details concerning the life of Jesus Christ. One of the very easy things to understand is the record that happened with Moses and the Israelites in the wilderness. Now remember, they all came out of Egypt. Moses is in the wilderness. The people are grumbling because they're saying, oh, we miss all the vegetables and all the good food we had back in Egypt. And so it's what God specifically does for them is He gives them manna, and it's called the grain of heaven. We can look in Psalm 78, and in verse 23 it says, "Yet He gave a command to the skies above and opened the doors of heaven. He rained down manna for the people to eat. He gave them the grain," or the bread from heaven, the bread of heaven. Now, when you look in the Gospel of John, first of all, let me say, when they got this manna, this grain that says it kind of tasted like coriander seed, and they would go out and harvest it in the morning, they didn't get this manna in the desert, the people didn't, and then run around and say, oh, this is about the coming Messiah. No, not at all. They had no clue about it, yet God is using it to be able to give details about the significance and things that are going to be accomplished by and through Jesus Christ. So now we go to the Gospel of John, chapter 6, and verse, I don't want to read the entire record. I'll leave that to you. But let's pick this up in John 6:32. It says, Jesus said to them, I tell you the truth. It is not Moses who has given you the bread from heaven, but it is my Father who gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is He who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. Verse 34, Sir, they said, from now on, give us this bread. And then Jesus says in verse 35, I am the bread of life. See, the manna was really, the purpose of it was a prophetic usage of a thing to point to the life of Jesus Christ. Excuse me. God also has done this with rock. Remember that there's the examples of Moses, and he's out in the, he's in the desert, Exodus 17, and then in Numbers 20, there's the record of the rock at Horeb in Exodus, and then the desert of Zin in Numbers 20. And God is instructing Moses, go to this rock and strike it and teach them. But the significance of the rock was that God wanted Moses to use a thing that would point to Jesus Christ. It's a prophetic foreshadow. And Romans 9:33 says, See, I lay in Zion a stone that causes men to stumble, and a rock that makes them fall. And the one who trusts in Him will never be put to shame. And that's exactly what Moses was teaching them in the desert. And then in Ephesians, it talks about Jesus Christ being the chief cornerstone. The cornerstone is a rock. And remember how Jesus even talked about, those that follow me, out of their bellies shall flow living waters. And then He spoke of Himself as being the living water. My point is, these are things, rocks, water. God is using things in a prophetic way to be able to point to the details of the coming Messiah, things in the Old Testament that Moses and others, were experiencing. There's also a record in how that there were venomous snakes that went through the Israelites in the desert and bit them, and many of them died because of their disobedience. And then we go to the Gospel of John, chapter 3, and in 14 and 15, John says, just as Moses lifted up the snake in the desert, so the Son of Man must be lifted up. How was the Son of Man lifted up? He was raised on, when he was crucified. And all who look to the Son of Man will be saved, just in the same way as all who looked to the snake that was on that pole would be saved. So there's an element of foreshadowing, of an element of a thing being used in the Old Testament to point to the future coming in the details of Christ's life. God also has done this specifically with the tabernacle. Now, the tabernacle was the tent that God had instructed Moses to make that had the Holy of Holies, the holy place, the outer court yard. It had the Ark of the Covenant that was stored inside it, and they would travel from place to place and erect it. And God told Moses very specifically that basically, in Exodus 25:9, he says, make this tabernacle and all its furnishings exactly like the pattern I will show you. Well, why such significance in being so picky on this? Well, because when we read in Hebrews 8:5, we get a realization that really the tabernacle was a copy of the heavenly tabernacle. That's what Hebrews 8:5 says. It says they serve at a sanctuary that is a copy and shadow of what is in heaven. A shadow is not the real deal. The shadow is the image that is cast off when the light shines on an object. It casts a shadow. You can see enough detail to know that they match, and you can gain enough detail from it to learn, but it's not the real thing. And that's what God is saying. Moses, you make this. Of course, it's not the real heavenly tabernacle, but it's supposed to give enough detail and evidence. And everything in that tabernacle is significant. It's even the priesthood, the Levites, and how they were priests and how they served as mediators between God and man. You see the parallel there? Same language even between Jesus as the mediator between God and man. The outer curtain wall, which is a separation of God's people, people in the world from the holiness of God and the reality of God and who he is and what he is. The altar of sacrifice, which is the first thing that you encounter, because without sacrifice, nothing can be done. There's no access to God. The bronze laver, which is a washing, ceremonial cleansing and purification that's required. Even the material bronze, there's significance to that. I don't have enough time in this teaching to develop it, but the material and the information is available and it is out there. And so, I want to entreat you to do your research. Look at these things because you will see tremendous aspects and clarity and details concerning Jesus Christ and what it was he did and the confirmation of this is not a coincidence. So there's the priesthood, the outer walls, there's the table of showbread, the altar of incense, the inner veil, the golden lampstands, the Ark of the Covenant and the mercy seat. It's a symbol of the law and the covenant with Israel and how Jesus fulfills that law. And it's God's mercy that basically makes this all available. Remember, God says he desires mercy and the blood of sacrifice sprinkled on the seat. So all of these things have tremendous significance. And we're talking about how God uses things to point to the reality of the future coming Christ, which now is a past event. But at the time that he told these people to record those events, at the time they did, it was, it's our past, it was their present. And now we look and we can see both them and Jesus Christ and how the two have matched in the details concerning it. There's even significance in colors. I have a friend, Michael Steenbergen, and Michael years ago told me how he had spent a tremendous amount of time just researching colors, the significance of colors, blue, red, purple. Purple is the royalty, the kingship. God is the king. Remember how Jesus Christ, when he was persecuted by the Roman centurions, they put a purple robe on him. And they're bowing down to him as if as if, this is, as if they're mocking him as a king. What they don't realize is they really are bowing before the true king. It's pretty ironic, many of the things that they did, and the truth of that they think they're doing it in mockery, and it's true. They all kneel before him and, bow to you, King of the Jews. The irony is he really was. And there's also a record that every knee shall bow. So the colors of scarlet in the tabernacle, scarlet meaning sacrifice. It also represents blood and forgiveness. Blue represents the seas and the heavens, God's throne, his throne and glory. White for purity. Green is not used in the temple. Why? Because green represents the earth. So there's materials and significance to the gold, the silver, the bronze, the wood, the hides, the fabrics, every object in that tabernacle. So I want to, again, encourage you to, if you're like me and you enjoy this kind of thing, then dig into it. There's lots of research by many, great theologians and wonderful guys out there, men and women who have researched this material. And so as you read this, it's almost, I like to tease, it's like that movie, The Matrix, where he says you can take the red pill or the blue pill. And if you take, I think it's the red pill, life is never the same again. Once you begin to understand this principle of prophetic foreshadowing, you never see the records in the Old Testament as just a story, just a nice story that God's including in his Bible. And why? Because these things all have significance, and it is true. Jesus Christ is the red thread throughout the entire Scripture, and God is telling his story, Jesus Christ's story, through people, places, things, time, and events.